When the alien ships first appeared in the sky, the world was completely unprepared. They didn't arrive with a huge explosion or destructive weapons as movies and stories had always imagined. Instead, they floated silently above the Earth. Enormous dark shapes that blocked the sunlight and created shadows that stretched across entire cities. People who saw them from the ground stopped in shock, staring up at the sky, unable to believe their eyes. Some thought it was a prank, a government test, or some kind of movie projection. But the reality soon became undeniable. These were real ships, and they were hovering in the sky with a presence that felt both alien and terrifying. Governments all over the world were thrown into panic. Military forces scrambled jets, missiles, and ships, trying to understand the intentions of these unknown visitors. People rushed to supermarkets, stocked up on food and water, and barricaded themselves in their homes. There was a mix of fear and confusion everywhere. The streets were empty in some cities, while others were filled with crowds moving quickly in chaos. Social media exploded with pictures, videos, and speculation. Nobody knew what the aliens wanted, and the uncertainty made everyone anxious then. The aliens spoke, or rather, their message appeared. Every television, every radio station, and every internet connection received the same communication simultaneously. The aliens' message was clear but chilling. They claimed that they had come to Earth to test humanity, to see if humans were worthy of existing on this planet. They said they had studied humans from afar and concluded that humans were weak, fearful, and easy to control. They claimed that the human race lacked the strength and intelligence to survive in the presence of a superior species. The announcement was meant to terrify, and it worked on almost everyone who heard it. The aliens announced that they would release a gas, something they called a terror agent, designed to break the human mind. This gas, they said, would force people into despair, panic, and madness. Anyone who came into contact with it would be overwhelmed by fear and hopelessness, unable to think clearly or defend themselves. Their plan was simple: watch humans collapse, confirm their weakness, and take over the planet without facing any resistance. This declaration caused immediate hysteria. Governments tried to issue warnings, telling citizens to stay inside and avoid the gas at all costs. People panicked even more, and the streets became chaotic as the day approached when the aliens were supposed to release the gas. There was a strange kind of silence across the world. People stayed indoors, some peeking through windows, some locked in panic rooms, and others huddled with family, waiting for the inevitable horror. The sky above every major city was filled with alien ships, their metallic surfaces glinting ominously in the sunlight, their shapes massive and intimidating. It was impossible to ignore them. Children asked their parents questions that had no easy answers. Adults tried to remain calm, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. When the gas was finally released, it moved like a living thing. Cameras and drones showed a strange, shimmering mist spreading across cities, creeping along streets, entering buildings and floating into homes. It was almost beautiful in its movement, a terrifying combination of elegance and menace. The world watched in horror, expecting screams, chaos, and destruction. Governments had prepared for mass evacuations and emergency medical responses. People were supposed to flee, hide, and cry for help. Everyone expected mass panic, and the aliens certainly expected it too. But something completely unexpected happened. Instead of panicking, some people did nothing. They stepped outside calmly, almost as if they were making a conscious choice to face what was coming. Some wore masks, some held cloth over their faces, but most did not run or scream. Parents held the hands of their children and walked slowly into the mist, reassuring them that everything would be okay, even when they weren't sure themselves. Neighbors met in the streets and nodded at one another, forming small groups and moving forward together. Strangers helped strangers, offering water, blankets, and comfort. The world had never seen anything like it. The aliens, watching from above, were confused. Their senses showed that the gas should have caused immediate terror, that the people it touched should have collapsed in panic. But instead, humans were walking calmly, some even smiling faintly as they faced the unknown. The aliens had assumed that fear would break them, that humans would crumble as soon as they felt the first effects of the terror gas. They were wrong. For humans, fear was not a new experience. Wars, natural disasters, diseases, and countless hardships had already forced humans to face danger and uncertainty again and again. They had learned to carry fear, to move forward despite it, and to survive when everything around them seemed hopeless. When the gas touched them, it triggered fear, yes, but it also triggered resilience. The fear became a challenge to overcome, not a signal to surrender. People held each other up, whispered words of encouragement, and reminded themselves and others that panic would only make things worse. Some individuals even paused and laughed quietly, not because the situation was funny, but because it was absurd. The aliens had assumed humans would be helpless. Instead, humans showed a strange courage that the aliens had not anticipated. Slowly, steadily, they walked forward through the mist. Some carried others on their shoulders. Some carried small pets or rescued people trapped by fear. In the midst of terror, humans showed solidarity, compassion, and strength. The first contact with the alien terror gas was supposed to mark humanity's defeat, but it became the opposite. The aliens had underestimated humans, assuming that fear was a weakness. Humans had spent their lives learning how to survive fear, how to endure suffering, and how to support each other when nothing else could be done. That morning, in cities and towns all over the world, humans proved something powerful, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it together. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, the mist thickened, spreading further across continents. Yet the streets, which had moments before been empty with panic, now showed small groups of humans walking forward with determination. Some were silent, some whispered prayers, some comforted children. Nobody ran, nobody screamed. Instead, humanity, in all its imperfection and resilience, simply faced the terror gassed without surrendering. It was not an organized military response, nor a coordinated plan, but something far more human: instinct, courage, and the refusal to give fear the control the aliens expected. In that moment, the aliens must have realized that humans were not like any species they had encountered. They had expected weakness, but what they saw was something they could not measure or control. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of facing even a terrifying, mind-breaking force with courage. They walked into the mist, and in doing so, they began a story of resistance that would change the way the aliens viewed the planet forever. When the terror gas began to spread, it was unlike anything humans had ever experienced. From the first moment, it moved with a strange, almost intelligent fluidity, drifting into streets, alleyways, parks and homes, on cameras and drones. The mist appeared almost alive, twisting and curling as if it had a mind of its own. Its color was difficult to describe. Sometimes it seemed gray, other times it shimmered with faint blues and greens, like oil on water. It had a strange smell too, faintly sweet but tinged with something metallic, a scent that immediately set nerves on edge. People who were still indoors reported a sharp sense of unease even before the gas entered their buildings. Windows and doors could not keep it out entirely. It slipped through the tiniest cracks, wrapping around furniture, crawling along walls, and settling like a blanket over the ground. As the gas spread further, the world waited for chaos to erupt. Military forces had been placed on high alert, leaders had prepared evacuation plans, and hospitals were ready for an influx of patients who might panic, collapse, or injure themselves. The aliens expected screams. They had calculated the levels of terror necessary to break humans and watched as the mist touched the cities below. Yet nothing happened as they predicted. On the streets, a strange calm began to emerge. Some people stayed inside, waiting, afraid to move. But others stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, they walked into the gas. They did not run. They did not shout. Their faces were serious, determined, yet strangely calm. Families emerged from their homes, parents holding children's hands, whispering reassuring words even as their own hearts pounded. Neighbors joined together, strangers forming small groups to face the unknown together. Each step into the mist was an act of defiance, a refusal to give the aliens the reaction they wanted. It was not that humans were fearless, far from it. Each person who stepped into the mist could feel it pressing against their mind. The gas seemed to probe to search for weaknesses, and for many, it triggered vivid memories of fear and failure. Some felt the terror of being lost as a child. Some relived moments of pain, grief, or humiliation. The mist seemed to whisper every doubt, every insecurity, and every fear humans had ever carried. But humans had faced fear before. They had survived wars, disasters, accidents, and personal tragedies. They had learned that fear was not a reason to surrender, it was something to endure. And in that endurance they found strength. As the mist thickened, some people laughed quietly, not in mockery, but in disbelief. It was almost absurd, they thought, that a being from another world believed this could break them. The laughter was soft, almost hidden, yet it was a statement. Humans were alive. They were aware. They were resisting. Even when fear came, they did not give in. Parents continued to hold their children's hands, whispering courage. Friends clasped each other's shoulders. Strangers offered water, blankets, and small comforts to anyone nearby, even in the presence of something designed to terrify them. Humans did what they always had. They helped each other survive. The aliens observed from above, scanning human responses with advanced sensors and technology. They had expected chaos, screaming, mass hysteria, physical collapse, and the breakdown of society. Instead, they recorded humans walking calmly into the gas. Their heart rates were elevated, yes, but not out of control. Emotional responses were intense, but humans maintained clarity. They experienced fear, but they did not allow it to control them. That aliens could not understand it. Their calculations had failed. They had underestimated a species that had spent millennia learning how to endure fear, pain, and uncertainty inside the gas. Humans experienced its effects in ways the aliens had not intended. Some felt visions of past failures, mistakes, and regrets, while others confronted memories of personal loss or trauma. The mist seemed to twist these memories into vivid hallucinations, creating illusions so real that it was difficult to tell where imagination ended and reality began. But humans did not succumb. They breathed through the fear, moved through the pain, and leaned on one another. The mist may have intended to isolate, but humans made connections stronger. Each shared glance, each hand held, each comforting word became a shield against the terror. Some small acts of heroism appeared spontaneously. A young man found a child who had been separated from his parents and carried him through the mist to safety. A group of friends created a chain, helping elderly neighbors across streets where the gas was thickest. Parents covered their children's faces with scarves or masks, even as they themselves inhaled the gas without hesitation. In these moments, the gas did not break humans, it revealed their resilience, empathy, and unity. It was not just courage that humans showed, it was stubbornness, the stubbornness of a species that refuses to be controlled. They moved slowly, deliberately, choosing to face fear on their own terms. The mist, meant to manipulate minds and crush spirits, became something almost irrelevant. The aliens had assumed that humans would react with panic, yet they were witnessing the opposite. Deliberate resistance, and solidarity in the face of something designed to destroy them mentally. The world, watching through live feeds, television, and social media, was both terrified and inspired. Some people recorded videos of others walking through the gas, sharing clips online. Comments flooded in, expressing disbelief, awe, and encouragement. "They are not afraid," one caption read. "They are showing what it means to be human," another said. Across the globe, the same pattern repeated. People walked forward, helping one another, facing fear with courage and solidarity. Even as the gas spread to every corner of the cities, humans maintained control over their minds and actions. They were not immune to fear, but they had learned to process it, channel it, and continue moving. The mist seemed to struggle against them, as though frustrated by its inability to break their spirit. Children walked with parents, friends supported one another, and strangers formed small communities of resistance. The aliens could not comprehend it. No calculations, no technology, no prediction could account for the strength that humans drew from one another. The first wave of the gas lasted for hours, yet the humans remained steadfast. They did not flee. They did not scream. They simply walked, step by step, through the mist, united and determined. Each person became part of an unspoken collective, a quiet resistance that needed no weapons, no strategy, and no orders. It was instinct, humanity's instinct to survive and protect one another, even in the face of an unknown terror designed to destroy their minds. By the end of the day, it became clear that the aliens' experiment had failed. They had expected to witness terror, despair, and collapse, yet instead, they saw courage, solidarity, and resilience. Humans had faced something utterly alien and frightening, yet they had refused to give in. They had not overcome fear, they had walked with it, understood it, and kept moving. Their calm defiance, their shared strength, and their unity had rendered the gas ineffective. In the eyes of the aliens, humanity had proven something unexpected. They were not the fragile, weak species they had assumed. They were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of facing unimaginable terror with courage and solidarity. The first contact with the terror gas was meant to be a test, a measure of weakness, but it became a demonstration of what humans were truly capable of. The aliens could see now that fear was not a tool that could easily control them. By the evening, humans emerged from the thickest parts of the mist, unharmed and unbroken. Streets were quiet, except for the soft hum of people checking on one another, helping those who had stumbled or grown tired. Children laughed softly, parents smiled with relief, and neighbors shared food and water. It was not a celebration, but a quiet acknowledgement of survival, resilience, and courage. Humans had faced the unknown and the terrifying without surrender. And in doing so, they had already begun to rewrite what the aliens understood about Earth and its people. As the humans continued to walk through the alien terror gas, they began to notice its strange effects on their minds. The mist was not simply a physical substance. It seemed to reach deep into their thoughts, their memories, and even their emotions. People began to see vision scenes from their past, moments of pain, fear, and regret. Some saw memories of loved ones lost. Others relived moments of failure or humiliation that they had tried to forget. The gas was meant to crush their spirits, to make them lose hope, and to break their minds. Yet the humans reacted in ways that the aliens could never have predicted. Even though the visions were frightening, humans did not panic. They had spent their entire lives facing challenges, losses, and uncertainties. Wars, accidents, natural disasters, and personal struggles had prepared them, in ways they didn't even always recognize, to face fear without surrendering to it. In the presence of this terrifying alien gas, humans remembered all the times they had survived before, and it gave them a strange kind of strength. They learned instinctively that fear could not control them if they refused to let it. Some paused to breathe slowly, grounding themselves, reminding their minds that the visions were not reality, they were only memories, echoes meant to unsettle them. Parents held their children tightly, whispering words of encouragement, even as they themselves felt the gas trying to invade their thoughts. They had to stay calm for the sake of the young ones. Children, sensing their parents' calm determination, did not cry or scream. They clutched hands and followed silently, understanding in their small way that courage was walking forward, even when everything around them was frightening and unknown. This small act of trust, of following and supporting one another, became a lifeline in the midst of the chaos. Friends and neighbors formed groups, sharing stories of resilience to fight the terror gas. Some people spoke of battles they had survived, illnesses they had endured, or times when they had felt hopeless but kept going. Even the simple act of talking, of hearing someone else's voice, strengthened human resolve. It was almost as if the gas could see their unity and realize that it was failing to break them because fear alone could not overpower shared courage. Each word, each gesture of support, was a shield against the invisible enemy that hovered around them. In the thick of the mist, some humans began to smile, not because they were happy about the gas or unafraid of what it could do, but because they had discovered something profound. Fear was not the end, it was a challenge, something to face and move through. The gas was designed to make them collapse mentally, but humans had learned to carry fear, to survive alongside it, and even to use it as motivation. Every step forward was a silent declaration. They would not surrender. They were aware of the danger, but awareness did not mean submission. Humans understood something the aliens did not. True strength often comes from acknowledging fear and still moving forward. Some people even laughed quietly in disbelief. It was not a loud, boisterous laugh, but a soft one, trembling with both relief and incredulity. They could hardly believe that a being from another world had assumed that fear could control them. "This is supposed to scare us," they whispered to one another. Their laughter spread quietly among those nearby, a ripple of human defiance that the aliens could neither understand nor predict. Every small smile, every quiet chuckle became a subtle rebellion against the gas. The aliens, observing from their ships, were baffled. Their scans and measurements indicated that the gas should have caused severe psychological breakdowns. Heart rates should have spiked uncontrollably. Panic levels should have skyrocketed. Minds should have been fractured, leaving humans helpless and begging for mercy. Yet the opposite was happening. Humans were moving together, communicating, helping each other, and even comforting strangers they had never met before. The aliens could not understand why their perfect formula for terror was failing as the day went on. The mist became thicker and more intense. It sought out weaknesses, probing the minds of humans, amplifying fear, regret, and doubt. Some people saw terrifying illusions of death, suffering, and loss. Others were confronted with their deepest insecurities, their failures, and moments when they had felt powerless. It was relentless, an assault on the human mind designed to push them to the edge. And yet, humans endured. They had faced suffering before, in many forms, and this was just another trial. They learned to breathe through it, to hold on to reality, and to support each other with small acts of courage. Even in extreme moments, humans did not act alone. A young woman carrying her child leaned on an older neighbor, who in turn was steadied by a friend across the street. Strangers offered scarves, water, blankets, or simply a hand to hold. Communities formed spontaneously, united by shared determination and instinctive cooperation. The gas was designed to isolate, to break the connection between humans, yet humans turned it into a demonstration of their unity. Every act of kindness and courage, no matter how small, became a shield against the alien attempt to break them. Some people paused in the middle of streets, appearing frozen to anyone watching from afar. But in reality, they were steadying themselves, breathing deeply, and reminding their minds that the visions and fears were not reality, they were illusions meant to unsettle them. Others closed their eyes for a moment, centering themselves, focusing on the sound of another person's voice, or the warmth of a hand holding theirs. Humans discovered quickly that calmness could counteract fear. It was not a magical resistance, it was simple human awareness and choice. They chose not to surrender. The gas became weaker in the presence of this collective resilience. It was almost as if the aliens had underestimated the human mind, assuming it would respond like an isolated, fragile system. But humans were not isolated. They were connected through empathy, compassion, and instinctive cooperation. Each person reinforced the others, creating a chain of mental and emotional strength. The mist could infiltrate thoughts and emotions, but it could not penetrate unity and courage. It could try to terrify, but humans would not comply. The experience of walking through the gas transformed many. People discovered hidden reserves of strength, courage, and resilience. Ordinary citizens who had never seen combat, who had never faced true danger, were now confronting fear at its most intense. And they were surviving. They were discovering that the human mind could endure far more than any alien gas could inflict. They were discovering the power of community, the strength of empathy, and the courage that comes from refusing to surrender. Even when every instinct tells you to run. By the end of the day, humans had begun to change. They were not just enduring, they were thriving under pressure. They had learned to walk through fear rather than be paralyzed by it. Families, friends, neighbors, and even strangers had created small networks of resilience that amplified each individual's strength. Children learned courage by watching adults. Adults learned resilience from each other. And strangers discovered the power of human solidarity. The gas was supposed to isolate, terrify, and destroy, but it had inadvertently united people in a profound way. The aliens had assumed that fear would break humans. Instead, fear became a teacher. The gas became a mirror, reflecting not weakness, but strength. Every step forward was a victory, every hand held a shield, and every shared smile a whispered word of comfort, a declaration of humanity's resilience. The humans were not perfect, they were tired, scared, and sometimes faltered, but even faltering became part of their strength because they continued moving forward together. In this moment, humanity began to reveal itself fully, not as a fragile species, but as one capable of surviving the unimaginable. The aliens watched, unable to predict or control the outcome. The humans had taken the terror meant to destroy them and transformed it into proof of their strength. They walked, they helped, they laughed softly, they held hands, they whispered words of encouragement, and through all of it, they refused to surrender. By nightfall, the mist had begun to thin in some areas. Yet the humans who had faced it were different. They had survived mental assaults, terrifying visions, and fear unlike anything they had known. And yet, they had not just survived, they had discovered the incredible strength that comes from walking through fear, together. The terror gas had failed, not because humans were fearless, but because they had faced fear with courage, unity, and determination. It was a lesson the aliens would never forget. Human strength could not be measured by fear alone. The aliens hovered above Earth, their massive ships scanning the cities and towns below. They had expected mass panic, chaos, and collapse. They had calculated the effects of their terror gas perfectly, certain that humans would crumble under its mental and emotional weight. Yet what they saw stunned them. Humans were not running in fear or screaming in desperation. Instead, they were moving steadily, calmly, and deliberately through the gas. They were helping each other, speaking softly, comforting the frightened, and even laughing quietly in the face of something that should have destroyed them. The aliens did not understand it. Their instruments measured heart rates, brain activity, and emotional responses. All the signals were there: the fear, the anxiety, the mental strain. But the humans were not broken. Their reactions did not match the predictions. They were experiencing fear, but it did not control them. Some slowed down, paused, or held hands, but none fled in terror. Even children walked quietly beside their parents, some clutching small toys for comfort, others staring at the mist with wide, curious eyes rather than screaming. Adults whispered encouragement, told stories, or sang softly to help steady minds. Strangers formed protective circles, helping each other across streets or through thick pockets of the gas. The aliens could see it more clearly. Now, human strength did not come from the absence of fear, but from how humans responded to it. Fear, they realized, was not a weapon against humanity. It was a test of endurance, and humans had been preparing for such tests for thousands of years. The gas might have broken minds, but it could not break the human spirit. It could attempt to separate, isolate, and terrify, yet humans created connection instead. Every hand held, every comforting word, every soft smile, was a countermeasure to the alien attempt to dominate them. Inside the gas, the humans felt its effects more intensely than ever. The mist reached deep into their consciousness, probing for weakness, showing hallucinations that made past regrets and fears feel real. Some people saw visions of death or loss, and the memories of loved ones they had failed to protect were vivid and painful. Others relived their worst mistakes, their deepest insecurities, and their long-hidden doubts. The gas seemed to amplify every fear in every moment of human vulnerability. Yet humans endured, and in doing so, they discovered something remarkable. Their fear did not control them, because they were never truly alone. Families became anchors of strength. Parents held their children close, whispering words of courage. Siblings leaned on one another. Friends and neighbors, many of whom had never met before, formed small networks of care and protection. Even strangers worked together, creating chains of assistance, holding hands to help the elderly or the injured move safely. Every small act of courage became contagious. Every demonstration of empathy, kindness, or support reinforced others' strength. The gas, designed to isolate and terrify, instead strengthened the bonds between humans. Some humans began to smile as they walked through the mist, not because the experience was pleasant or easy, but because they realized the gas could not break them. It could attempt to manipulate their thoughts and emotions, but it could not separate them from one another or destroy the instincts that had kept humans alive for millennia. They had learned, through suffering, struggle, and survival, that fear was something to acknowledge, not surrender to. It could be a teacher, a challenge, a mirror showing them what they were capable of. And in that mirror they saw courage reflected back at them, moment by moment. The aliens, meanwhile, were growing increasingly confused and frustrated. They had studied human psychology from afar, believing they understood the species. They thought that fear would make humans collapse instantly. They had anticipated screaming, chaos, and panic. Instead, they witnessed calm, resilience, and unity. The humans' emotional responses were complicated, intelligent, and unpredictable. Even when fear and visions of suffering struck them, humans adapted and continued. They improvised, comforted one another, and refused to give the aliens the expected outcome. Throughout the cities, small acts of heroism were everywhere. A man carried a woman who had tripped and could not walk through the thickest part of the gas. A group of teenagers guided elderly neighbors to safety, sharing masks and scarves to reduce inhalation. Parents shielded children with blankets, scarves, and their own bodies, sometimes placing themselves directly in the path of the most intense pockets of mist. Strangers rescued pets trapped in the streets, forming spontaneous alliances to protect the most vulnerable. These acts were not organized or planned, they were instinctive. Humans simply did what humans had always done: help one another survive. Even as exhaustion set in, humans continued. The gas was draining, mentally and physically, yet they walked on. They whispered encouragement, sang softly, and reminded each other to breathe. They shared water, blankets, and even small morsels of food they had brought with them. Children learned courage by watching adults, and adults were reminded of strength by the determination of those around them. Every human became a source of support for others, and the collective resilience made the gas less effective than ever. The aliens could see now that they had miscalculated entirely. Their terror gas was supposed to break minds and spirits, but instead it revealed humanity's greatest strengths: empathy, resilience, and unity. Humans were unpredictable, adaptive, and capable of facing mental assaults far more intense than the aliens had anticipated. That species could not be measured by fear alone, because humans had learned to use fear as fuel to keep moving forward. They had learned to turn terror into courage, panic into patience, and uncertainty into determination. Some humans even found moments of levity amidst the terror. A mother whispered jokes to a child, who giggled despite the mist. Friends laughed quietly about small, absurd memories, sharing the relief of surviving another step. Even strangers found ways to comfort each other with humor, stories, or gentle reassurance. These moments, small and fleeting as they were, created mental shields against the gas's attempts to terrify and isolate. Each human acted as a support for others, and together, they became almost impervious to the alien design. The first full day under the gas ended with humans still standing, exhausted, yes, but unbroken. Families, friends, and strangers alike had faced visions of past pain, hallucinations of death, and the raw force of fear, yet they had survived. The gas had failed to break them mentally or emotionally. The aliens, observing from above, began to understand what they had not anticipated. Humans were not a species that could be controlled by fear alone. Fear could challenge them, push them to their limits, but it could not dominate them because humans had a resilience that was both instinctive and learned over centuries. By evening, some areas of the cities were quiet. People paused, checked on each other, and shared small moments of comfort. They were not celebrating, but they were acknowledging a shared survival. Children hugged parents tightly. Adults helped neighbors, offering water and blankets. Strangers offered gentle words, gestures, and support. It was a quiet demonstration of human strength, built on courage, unity, and compassion. No weapon, no technology, no alien strategy could diminish it. The aliens could see this too. They had assumed humans would panic and flee, that society would collapse under fear. But instead, humans had turned fear into something else. They had used it to connect, to survive, and to reveal the strength of their species. The terror gas, designed to isolate, divide, and terrify, had failed entirely. Humans had faced it not as individuals, but as communities, as families, as neighbors, and even as strangers helping strangers. Every act of courage amplified the next, creating a ripple of resistance that the aliens could not comprehend. As night fell, humans were exhausted but unbroken. They had faced fear unlike any before, and they had walked through it together. They had discovered something fundamental about themselves. Courage is not the absence of fire, it is the ability to face fear while holding on to empathy, connection, and hope. They had learned that unity, care for one another, and shared determination could protect them in ways the aliens had never imagined. Even in darkness, even in uncertainty, they had remained steadfast. Humans had taught themselves and the aliens a profound lesson. They were not weak, fragile, or predictable. They were resilient, empathetic, and capable of facing unimaginable terror with courage and solidarity. The terror gas, meant to destroy them, had instead revealed the true nature of humanity, a species that could endure fear, transform it into strength, and face the unknown together, without surrender. After hours of human resilience and courage, the terror gas finally began to dissipate. The alien ships still hovered in the sky, watching closely. But the mist that had been intended to terrify and control humans slowly thinned and disappeared. For the first time, the world could see the people who had survived it not as fragile, panicked victims, but as a species that had faced an unimaginable threat and refused to give in. Streets that had been empty and tense were now filled with people emerging cautiously, checking on one another, and helping those who had stumbled or grown weak from the gas's effects. Families gathered in small groups, holding each other, whispering words of reassurance and relief. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide with wonder at the strange events they had survived. Parents smiled softly, exhausted but proud, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment for keeping their loved ones safe. Neighbors helped each other collect essentials that had been dropped or scattered during the hours in the mist. Strangers exchanged words of comfort, shared food and water, and hugged each other silently. No one shouted, no one celebrated loudly. The quiet sense of victory was palpable in every street and every home. The aliens, observing from above, were astonished. Their calculations had failed. Their technology, designed to measure fear, anxiety, and psychological collapse, had been rendered useless by human resilience. The species they had assumed would be broken by terror had not only endured it but had grown stronger in response. Humans had faced visions of their deepest fears, hallucinations of pain and loss, and the pressure of the unknown, and yet they had not faltered. The aliens began to understand, slowly and reluctantly, that this was a species unlike any they had ever encountered, strong, adaptive, and united in ways that could not be measured by science alone. Throughout the city's acts of quiet heroism continued. A man helped an elderly woman who had grown weak from inhaling the gas, guiding her to safety with patience and care. Parents helped each other comfort children who were still shaken, using soft words, gentle touches, and simple distractions to calm them. Groups of strangers worked together to repair small damages caused by the gas or help people retrieve belongings they had dropped. Even small gestures, a hand held, a blanket shared, a whispered reassurance became acts of courage, small demonstrations of humanity's unbreakable spirit. Some people laughed quietly, the first time in hours, not because the situation was funny, but because they could not believe they had survived it. That laughter spread, faintly at first, then more boldly, as more humans emerged from the fog and discovered they were unharmed. It was a strange, hopeful sound in a world that had been filled with fear and tension. Even in laughter, there was a sense of shared victory, a quiet acknowledgement that humans had faced something impossible and had endured. As the night continued, humans began to reflect on what had happened. They had walked through a terror unlike anything before, a gas designed to attack their minds, their memories, and their very sense of control. They had been forced to confront fear, pain, and uncertainty in its most extreme form, and yet they had survived not through weapons, not through advanced technology, but through unity, courage, and empathy. Each act of kindness, each shared hand, each comforting word had become a shield against the alien design. Humans had not overcome fear, they had carried it, endured it, and walked forward while facing it together. The aliens, still observing, sent another message. Their voice or their communication was formal and cautious. They admitted what they had already realized: their test had failed. Humans had passed, not by being fearless, but by being courageous, connected, and unyielding. The aliens acknowledged that this species could not be controlled by terror, that fear alone was insufficient to dominate them. They were a species capable of enduring unimaginable pressure and responding with compassion, unity, and resilience. It was an admission of defeat, and it carried a sense of respect that humans could feel even from the strange, the distant voice of another world. Even as the aliens prepared to leave, humans did not react with aggression or triumphalism. There were no celebrations of revenge or conquest. Instead, people returned to their families, their communities, and their routines. They checked on neighbors, comforted those who were shaken, and began quietly helping rebuild minor damages. Children, curious and brave, explored the streets with their parents, learning in subtle ways about courage, unity, and resilience. The lesson of the day was clear. Fear could be faced, survived, and even transformed into strength. And humans had discovered this together. Across the globe, small moments of humanity shone brightly. A woman found a neighbor trapped by fallen debris and carried him home. Friends who had lost contact during the chaos reunited, embracing silently. Strangers offered food and water to anyone in need. Pets were rescued from danger. Every small act was a testament to the same lesson. Humans were not defined by fear, but by their capacity to face it together. Even in exhaustion, even in the aftermath of terror, humans remained compassionate, caring, and connected. Some people reflected quietly on the aliens themselves. They were no longer just invaders. They were witnesses. Witnesses to a species that refused to surrender, that turned terror into solidarity, that had discovered the power of walking through fear rather than fleeing from it. There was a sense of amazement that humans could survive something that had been meant to destroy them. Stories began to circulate, shared quietly at first, then more broadly, of bravery, of small acts of heroism, of communities that had faced terror together and emerged stronger. By the next morning, the world had changed, but quietly. People went back to their work, schools, and daily lives. The streets were cleaner, communities more connected, and individuals more aware of their own courage and resilience. The alien ships, still hovering in the distance, began to leave the skies. Humans watched, but did not cheer or jeer. They simply observed, understanding that the lesson was already theirs. Survival was not about weapons, fear, or power. It was about courage, empathy, and unity. Families hugged each other, sharing quiet relief and gratitude. Neighbors exchanged smiles and stories of what they had seen, learned, and endured. Children absorbed the bravery of adults, learning that fear could be faced and survived. Communities became stronger, not because of technology or government intervention, but because humans had relied on each other in a moment of extreme danger. The connections they had formed, the courage they had shown, and the empathy they had expressed became a kind of invisible shield against fear. The aliens, now leaving Earth's orbit, had learned something profound. Humans could not be measured by fear alone, that they could survive, adapt, and even thrive when faced with unimaginable terror. Fear was not weakness. Unity, empathy, courage, and shared resilience were what truly defined humanity. And humans had proven definitively that these qualities could not be defeated, even by an advanced species with powers and technology beyond comprehension. By the time the ships disappeared into the distance, humanity had not only survived but learned something crucial. They had faced the ultimate test of courage and resilience and had come through it stronger and more connected than before. There was no fanfare, no loud celebration, just quiet confidence, gratitude, and an understanding that the strength of humans did not lie in power, weapons, or control, but in their capacity to face fear, support one another, and keep walking forward even in the face of the unknown. The first contact with extraterrestrial terror had ended, and the world was still. Yet beneath the quiet streets, in homes and neighborhoods across the globe, a profound lesson had been learned. Humans had discovered that fear, no matter how powerful, could be met with courage. Isolation could be met with unity. The threat could be met with compassion. Pain could be met with care. And even the most advanced beings from another world could not break the spirit of a species that refused to surrender to terror. In the days and weeks that followed, stories spread, stories of courage, compassion, and resilience. They were told quietly at first, then more widely. People shared what they had witnessed, how neighbors helped strangers, how families held each other, and how even small gestures had turned fear into strength. These stories became part of the human record, lessons that would be remembered for generations, that no matter how terrifying the threat, humanity could face it together, survive it, and emerge stronger. Humans had not just survived the terror gas, they had transformed the experience into proof of what made them unique. It was not technology, weapons, or strategy that had saved them. It was their courage, their empathy, their connection to one another, and their refusal to surrender to fear. They had walked through terror and emerged stronger, proving that the true power of humanity lay not in what they could destroy, but in what they could endure together.